Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bikkurim. We are up to the final Mishnah of Perek Daled of Masechet Bikkurim of Seder Zraim, Perek Daled Mishnah Hey. The Mishnah continues to discuss now, Eno Shaveh Lo Na'anashim V'lo Nashim Ketzad. How is an androgynous not like men or women? And we explained in the beginning of the Perek, an androgynous is a person of unknown gender because he was born with both male and female body parts. The Mishnah now discusses how is an androgynous not like men or women. And hayavin al tumato, one is not obligated to bring an offering on account of his tumah, meaning if an androgynous has both white and red discharges, in which case he is certainly tameh, and then he or someone else who came into contact with both discharges entered the temple or ate holy food, which a tameh person is forbidden to do, he is not obligated to bring an offering to atone for his sin. And the Mefarshim explained, we learned that an androgynous who has a white discharge becomes tameh out of doubt because he might be a man, and an androgynous, we learned that in Mishnah Bet, Mishnah 2, and an androgynous who has a red discharge becomes tameh out of doubt because he might be a woman, like we learned in Mishnah 3. Therefore, an androgynous who has both types of discharges is certainly tameh, since an androgynous is either a man or a woman. Nevertheless, if an androgynous who has both types of discharges, or a person who came into contact with both of his discharges, enters the temple or eats holy food, he does not have to bring an offering. Now, although a tameh person who enters the temple or eats holy food must bring an offering to atone for his sin, like the Torah says in Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 5, Psukim 2 through 6, that applies only to a definite male or a definite female, and not to an androgynous whose tumah is based on him being possibly a male or possibly a female, as the Gemara says on Masechet Nida, page 28a and 28b. The Mishnah continues, Ve'en sofin al tumato. One does not burn tirumah on account of his tumah, meaning if an androgynous has either a white or a red discharge, in which case he has tameh out of doubt, and then touch some tirumah, the tirumah may not be burned, which is the usual treatment of tirumah that is tameh, since it is tameh only out of doubt. And Vashim explain, while tirumah that is tameh we know must be burned, one is forbidden to destroy tirumah that is not tameh. And therefore, if an androgynous has either a white discharge or a red discharge, which makes him tameh only out of doubt, and then he touches some tirumah, the tirumah is only tameh out of doubt, and therefore it may not be burned, because by doing so, one might be violating the prohibition against destroying tirumah. Now, in this respect, an androgynous is different from a tameh person who had a white discharge, a tameh man who had a white discharge, and a tameh woman who had a red discharge, because they are definitely tameh, and tirumah touched by one of them would have been burned. Now, the Mefarshim add, the Mishnah's ruling applies only to an androgynous who had one type of discharge, either red or white. If he had both a white discharge and a red discharge, which would make him definitely tameh, and then he touched tirumah, it would have to be burned, because then it is tameh without question. That's different from the Mishnah's previous ruling about an androgynous who entered the temple or ate sacred food. In that case, we said he's exempt from punishment, even if he had both types of discharges, because the Torah specifically excludes an androgynous from liability. The Mishnah continues, Ve'eno ne'erach lo cha'anashim v'lo kenashim. Unlike men and unlike women, an androgynous cannot be the subject of an erech vow. We know an erech is a vow in which a person declares that he will give the erech, literally the value of a specific person to the temple. The Torah in Sefer Vayikra, chapter 27, Psukim 1 through 8, gives a fixed erech, a fixed value for every person based on his age and gender. For example, the erech of a man between 20 and 60 years old is 50 shkalim. Our Mishnah teaches that someone who declares that he will give the erech of an androgynous does not need to give anything, because the Torah refers there only to definite males and definite females, and this excludes androgynuses. And the Mepharshim quote Masechet Erechim, page 4b, Masechet Nida, page 28b. Ve'eno nimkar be'eved ivri lo cha'anashim v'lo kenashim. Unlike men and unlike women, he cannot be sold as a Hebrew servant. The Mefarshim give us the background. A Jewish man may be sold as a Hebrew servant, eved ivri, in one of two ways. If he is poor, he may sell himself in order to support himself and his family, like the Torah says in Vayikra, chapter 25, pasuk 39. And if he steals and is unable to repay, the court may sell him and give the money to the victim of the theft, as the Torah says in Sefer Shemot, chapter 22, pasuk 2. Each of these situations are relevant only to an adult man, meaning at least 13 years old. A boy cannot sell himself because he's unable to make monetary transactions, as we know in Mishnah Masechet Gitin, chapter 5, Mishnah 7. And a boy cannot be sold by the court because he is not subject to court action, like the Gemara says in Masechet Baba Kama, Mishnayot, chapter 8, Mishnah 4. Regarding a woman, however, the opposite is true. An adult woman, at least 12 years old, cannot be sold as a Hebrew servant under any circumstance, like the Mishnayot speak about in Masechet Sotah, chapter 3, Mishnah 8, and the Rambam Hilchot Avadim, chapter 1, Halakha 2, whereas the girl under the age of 12 can be sold by her father, like the Torah says in Sefer Shemot, chapter 21, Pasuk 7. So it comes out that a male can be sold to be a Hebrew servant only if he is an adult, while a female can be sold only if she is a minor. Therefore, an androgynous can never be sold. If he is a minor, he cannot be sold because he might be a male. And if he's an adult, he cannot be sold because he might be a female. And if someone saw an androgynous and said, I am a Nazir, if this person is either not a man or not a woman, he becomes a Nazir, since one of these two options, either not a man or not a woman, is certainly true. Now, the Mefarshim explain the rulings of this chapter until this point have been based on the premise that an androgynous is either a man or a woman, but we do not know which. The next Tana that we're going to quote, Rabbi Yossi, however, he considers it possible that an androgynous is neither a man nor a woman, but belongs to a category of his own. This Tana contrasts an androgynous with a tumtum, which literally means hidden one, who is a person that has a thick membrane covering the reproductive organs, which makes it impossible to tell whether he is a man or a woman. Rabbi Yossi says, androgynos biriya b'fnei atzmah v'lo echriu bo chachamim im ish im isha. An androgynous is a creature in its own right, and the sages could not decide whether he is a man or a woman, meaning there are three possibilities. An androgynous is either a man or a woman, or a third type, neither male or female, meaning the Mefarshim explain, in contrast to the preceding Tana, who holds that an androgynous is either a man or a woman, Rabbi Yossi holds that an androgynous could be neither male nor female, but a distinct sort of being. One practical difference between these two opinions arises where someone said, I am a Nazir if this androgynous is neither a man nor a woman. According to the first Tana, he is definitely not a Nazir, because he holds that an androgynous might be one or the other. But according to Rabbi Yossi, he is a Nazir out of doubt, because it's possible that an androgynous is a third type, which is neither male nor female. Aval tumtum enochen and a safek ish safek isha, but a tumtum is not like this. Rather, a tumtum is possibly a man or possibly a woman, but certainly not a third type, because the tumtum definitely has the organs of either a man or a woman, but we cannot tell because they are covered. And that is Rabotai of today's Mishnayot Masechet Bikkurim. We have concluded Mishnayot Seder Zraim Hadran Alach Seder Zraim ve'Hadrach Alan, which means we shall return to you the order of Zraim, and you shall return to us. We have concluded with Mishnayot Seder Zraim. We begin now Mishnayot Seder Moed with Masechet Shabbat, with Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. Now, this chapter will primarily discuss the melacha of Hotza'ah, taking out, which we will refer to as transferring. The Torah forbids moving an object on Shabbat from a private domain to a public domain, or from a public domain to a private domain. And the Mefarshim explain, a private domain known as Reshut HaYachid, it's an enclosed area that measures at least 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim and has walls at least 10 tfachim high. Although it's called a private domain, there's no need for it to have a private owner. And Mefarshim bring down, there are different opinions about the length of a tefach, handbreadth, ranging between 3.2 and 3.8 inches, which would be between 8 and 9.6 centimeters. A public domain, a Reshut HaRabim, is an open area such as a street that is at least 16 amot wide and is used by many people. Some authorities rule that it must be used by at least 600,000 people. Now, an amma is 6 tvachim, and therefore an amma measures between 18.9 and 22.7 inches, which would come out to between 48 to 57.7 centimeters, and you would need that to be times 16. It would have to be that wide. The Torah forbids transferring objects on Shabbat from one of these domains to the other, as well as moving an object 4 amot in a public domain. Our Mishnah is going to deal with transferring from one domain to another. The Mishnah will describe some forms of transferring that are forbidden by the Torah and some that are forbidden by the rabbis. Yitziot HaShabbat Shetayim Shen Arba Bifnim. the transfers that are prohibited on Shabbat are of two types forbidden by the Torah. There are four types when rabbinic law is included in the case of a person standing inside a private domain. Ushtaim shen arba bachutz, and of two types forbidden by the Torah, that are four types when rabbinic law is included in the case of a person standing outside in public domain. Meaning, there are four types of prohibited transfers. Two that are forbidden by the Torah and another two that are forbidden by the rabbis. Each set of four types is prohibited both to a person who is standing inside a private domain and to a person standing in a public domain. The Mishnah describes the two types of transfers that are biblically forbidden to a person standing inside a public domain. Ketzad, how is this so? He'ani omed bachutz ubal habayit bifnim. Take the example of a poor person standing outside in the street, which is a public domain, and a homeowner standing inside his house, which is a private domain. The Rav says, the Mishnah uses the example of a homeowner and a poor person to teach that although it is a great mitzvah to give charity, one may not break the laws of Shabbat to do this mitzvah. So the Mishnah says, Pashat he'ani et yado lifnim v'natan letoch yado shel bal habayit. If the poor person, while holding let's say a basket in his hand, extended his hand into the house and put the object into the homeowner's hand, which Mefarshim explained, just to give a background before we continue, transferring is forbidden by the Torah only if it includes these two steps. Number one, the act of removing the object from its place of rest in one domain, akira, removing it from its place of rest, and number two, putting it down in the other domain, hanacha. You need akira and hanacha, uprooting it from its place of rest in one domain, putting it down in the other domain. If a person does both of these acts, he has broken biblical law. If a person does only the first part and someone else does the other part, neither has broken biblical law, but they both have committed a rabbinic transgression because the rabbis prohibited even one part of a transfer. In this case that we just said, the poor person did an entire act of carrying. He removed the object from its place of rest in the Reshut HaRabim, Akira, and he put it down in the Reshut HaYachid, Hanacha. Since he did both parts of the transfer, he has committed a biblical transgression. Since the homeowner is still standing in the house, anything placed in his hand is considered put down in the Reshut HaYachid. So again, Pashat he'ani et yado lifnim v'natan letoch yado shel bal habayit. If the poor person, while holding an object, a basket in his hand, extended his hand into the house and put the object into the homeowner's hand, o shenatal mitocha ve'otzi, or if the poor person took an object like a loaf of bread from the homeowner's hand and took it out of the house. So here, the poor person did an entire act of carrying out. He removed the object from its place in the Reshut HaYachid, Akira, and he put it down into the Reshut HaRabim, Hanacha, which will be a biblical transgression as well. He'ani chayav ubal habayit patur. In both of these cases, the poor person is liable for having committed a biblical transgression and the homeowner is exempt. Like we explained, the homeowner is liable, we said he'ani chayav ubal habayit patur. The poor person is liable, the homeowner is exempt. The poor person is biblically liable, like we explained, because he did both acts. The homeowner, although has not broken even rabbinic law, because he did neither the removal nor the putting down. Now, throughout this Masechet, we're going to refer a person who has violated a Torah prohibition, we refer to him as chayav, liable, meaning he is liable to the penalties for desecrating Shabbat on a biblical level. If he sinned in the presence of two qualified witnesses who told him that the act is forbidden and the nature of its punishment, he's liable to the death penalty. If he sinned without witnesses, he is punished by heaven with karet. And if he sinned unintentionally, for example, he did not know that the act is forbidden, he must bring a chatat offering, a sin offering, in the temple. Right? These are the two types of transfer that are forbidden by the Torah to a person standing in a public domain. The Mishnah now describes the two types of transfers that are biblically forbidden to a person inside a private domain. Until now we spoke about a person standing in a public domain. Now we're going to speak about a person standing inside a private domain. Pashat bal habayit et yado lachutz v'natan letoch yado shel ani. If the homeowner, while holding an object in his hand, extended his hand out of the house and put the object into the poor person's hand, the homeowner did an entire act of carrying out. He removed the object from its place in the Reshut HaYachid, Akira, and he put it down in the Reshut HaRabim, Hanacha. Or if the homeowner took an object from the poor person's hand and brought it into the house, so here he did an entire act of carrying in. He removed it from its place of rest in Reshut HaRabim, Akira, and he put it down in Reshut HaYachid, Hanacha. Bal habayit chayav ve'ani patur. The homeowner is liable and the poor person is exempt, because again, since the homeowner did both parts of the transfer, he is biblically liable. The poor person who did neither is exempt. Now, in the previous 4 cases, either the homeowner or the poor person has committed a biblical transgression. The Mishnah next is going to describe 2 cases in which only rabbinic law is broken. If the poor person holding an object in his hand extended his hand into the house and the homeowner took the object from it, right? So in this case, the poor person removed the object from its place in the Reshut HaRabim and carried it into the Reshut HaYachid, but he didn't put it down there. Instead, it was the homeowner who put it down in the Reshut HaYachid. Now, although an object in a person's hand is considered at rest in that domain, that's only true when his hand is in the same domain as his body. So when the poor person extended his hand into the house, the object has not technically been put down. It was the homeowner who put it down by taking it from the poor person's hands. Or or if the homeowner put an object into the poor person's extended hand, and the poor person, withdrawing his hand, took the object out of the house. So the poor person extended his empty hand into the Reshut HaYachid, and the homeowner put an object into the poor person's hand. The poor person then pulled his hand back, and put the object down in Reshut HaRabim. So the homeowner removed the object from its place, and the poor person put it down. That's the opposite of the previous one in 2 ways. In the previous case, the object was carried in, while here it was carried out. And also there, the poor person did the akira and the homeowner did the hanacha. Here it's the other way around. The homeowner did the akira and the poor person did the hanacha. Shneim pturin, they are both exempt with respect to biblical law, but each one has violated the rabbinic law. Again, since neither the poor person nor the homeowner did both parts of the transfer, they have not committed a biblical transgression, but by doing one part of the transfer, each has broken rabbinic law. The Mishnah ends now with 2 more cases where rabbinic law is broken. Pashat balabayit idado lachutz v'natal ani mitocha. If the homeowner holding an object in his hand extended his hand out of the house and the poor person took the object from it. So here, the homeowner removed the object from its place in the Reshut HaYachid and the poor person put it down in Reshut HaRabim. So in this case, it's the same as the last one. The difference here is that the homeowner not only removed the object from its place, but he also transferred it into the Reshut HaRabim. In the previous case, we said the poor person extended his hand into the house, the homeowner took it, or if the homeowner put an object into the poor person's extended hand. Here, the homeowner extended his hand out and the poor person took it. O shenatan letocha v'ichnis. Or if the poor person put an object into the homeowner's extended hand, and the homeowner withdrawing his hand brought the object into the house. So here, the poor person removed the object from its place in Reshut HaRabim, and the homeowner put it down in Reshut HaYachid. Shneim pturin, they are both exempt at the biblical level, but these transfers are forbidden by rabbinic law. And the Mefarshim give us a nice conclusion. The Mishnah began by stating the transfers are of 2 types that are 4 types. This refers to 2 biblical transgressions, and 2 rabbinic transgressions will make a total of 4. The 2 biblical transgressions are those in which one person did the entire act, akira and hanacha, of carrying the object out, or the entire act of carrying it in. However, the Mishnah proceeded to mention not just 2 rabbinic transgressions, but 4 rabbinic transgressions. Number 1, one person, either the homeowner or the poor person, did only the akira. Number 2, he did the akira and he carried the object into the other domain. Number 3, he did not do the akira, but he carried the object from the other domain and did the hanacha. And number 4, he did only the hanacha. So we have to say that of these 4 rabbinic transgressions, the Mishnah counts only 2 of them in its opening statement. These are the ones that might lead to a biblical transgression where the person did the where the person did the akira. In the case of number 1 and number 2, but not 3 and 4, the Rav says why? Since he began the act, again, number 1 and 2 was one person did only the akira, and number 2 was he did the akira and he carried the object into the other domain. The Rav says that maybe the Mishnah only said 2 rabbinic because it was counting these 2. Since he began the act, he might complete the entire melacha and commit a biblical transgression. But the last 2, where he did not do the akira, but he carried the object from the other domain to the hanacha, or he did only the hanacha, since he's completing the act, even though he violated rabbinic law, the Mishnah didn't count those in the opening statement of 2 possible rabbinic transgressions. And that is in Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Again, Chazak u'Baruch, and finishing Seder Zra'im. We begin now with Seder Moed. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.